When Jasmine Crockett took the microphone, the room shifted instantly. She didn't waste a second on pleasantries. Her voice cut through the noise with words sharp enough to leave no doubt about what was coming. "Texas Republicans have been lying to you for years," she declared, her tone both fiery and deliberate. "And today, I'm going to show you the receipts." The phrase hit like a thunderclap. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward, and even her opponents froze for a moment. This was not going to be another cautious political exchange. Crockett framed the confrontation not as a debate, but as a reckoning. The opening lines were not just words, they were a warning shot, daring her rivals to challenge the evidence she was prepared to unleash. What made the moment so gripping was the precision with which she spoke, every syllable landing like a verdict in a courtroom. The audience sensed that what they were about to witness was more than just politics as usual. It was the beginning of a public takedown that would ripple far beyond Texas. Crockett's first words were the spark that lit the fuse. The clash unfolded inside a packed legislative chamber in Texas, where tensions between Democrats and Republicans had been simmering for months. At the center of the storm was a controversial bill designed to restrict voting access, a measure that critics argued would silence minority communities. Republicans framed it as an effort to secure elections, but the opposition called it a direct assault on democracy itself. Jasmine Crockett, a Democrat known for her relentless style, was already a familiar adversary to the Texas Republican bloc. They underestimated her once, and they had paid for it in headlines that went national. This time, however, they came prepared with talking points, statistics, and the usual rhetoric about fraud and integrity. Facing her across the room sat some of the most prominent Republican voices in the state, men and women determined to defend the legislation at any cost. The media had gathered in force, anticipating fireworks, while across the nation, millions tuned in online, hungry for a fight that had already been teased on social media. Crockett wasn't standing against one opponent, but an entire political machine. And yet, as she scanned the room, her calm defiance signaled that she was ready to dismantle them piece by piece. The context was more than local politics. It was a national battle over the future of voting rights, and Crockett had positioned herself as the face of resistance. Crockett leaned into the microphone, her eyes locked on the Republican panel. "You keep talking about election integrity," she began, her tone steady. "But where is your integrity when you deliberately cut polling places in Black and Latino neighborhoods? Where is your integrity when you pass laws that force people to wait 6, 7, 8 hours just to cast a ballot?" The words landed like blows. One Republican tried to interject, insisting the bill was about preventing fraud, but Crockett didn't hesitate. "Fraud?" she snapped back. "You failed to produce evidence of widespread fraud every single time you've been asked. Show me the proof right now or admit you're building this on a lie." Gasps rippled across the chamber, cameras catching every second. She pressed further, citing documented cases where voting machines were deliberately underfunded in minority districts while wealthy suburbs received full resources. "This isn't about security," she declared, her voice rising. "It's about control, and the people of Texas are smart enough to see it." Republicans shuffled their papers, searching for talking points, but she cut them off again. "Do you know what this looks like to the rest of America? It looks like fear. You are afraid of the voters. You are afraid of their voices, their power, their truth. And that is why you hide behind fake claims and broken excuses." The chamber erupted in shouts and applause, divided between fury and admiration. Crockett had turned the debate into a trial, and her opponents were the ones on the stand. One Republican finally snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. "You're grandstanding, Crockett. This bill protects every legal voter. You're twisting facts to fit your agenda." His voice echoed across the chamber, drawing murmurs of approval from his allies. For a moment, it seemed like he might have seized control of the narrative, but Crockett was ready. She reached into a stack of documents and pulled out a printed report. "Agenda?" she repeated, her tone dripping with challenge. "Then explain this. This is your own state's data, page 42, paragraph 3. It shows that less than 1 in a million votes in Texas are even suspected of fraud, not proven, suspected. And you want to rewrite the entire system based on that?" The room went silent. The Republican's face froze as the camera zoomed in on the report in her hand. Crockett continued, her voice now like steel. The truth is, this bill has nothing to do with protecting voters. It has everything to do with protecting your power. And if you think the people of Texas or the people of America are too blind to see that, you are in for a brutal awakening. The silence broke into chaos. Applause, shouts, arguments. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment. What had started as a defensive pushback from her opponents had just detonated into a turning point. Crockett's brutal fact, pulled directly from their own documents, had stripped away the last shield of credibility. The debate wasn't just political anymore, it was personal, raw, and impossible to ignore. As the uproar settled, Crockett leaned forward once more, her voice calm but unyielding. "This is bigger than Texas," she said, every word deliberate. "This is about whether America will move forward as a democracy or collapse into a system where only the powerful get to choose who counts. And let me be crystal clear, the people will not be silenced." The chamber was buzzing, but Crockett didn't wait for applause. She finished with a line that pierced through the noise and would soon echo across social media feeds, news broadcasts, and dinner table conversations nationwide. "You can suppress votes, but you cannot suppress the truth." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Within minutes, clips of her statement were trending, hashtags exploding, commentators replaying the moment as if it were the climax of a historic trial. For her supporters, it was a rallying cry. For her opponents, a nightmare that refused to fade. Across the country, the debate ignited about power, democracy, and the future of America itself. Jasmine Crockett had not just confronted Texas Republicans, she had defined the stakes of the national conversation. And with one relentless speech, she left no doubt that the fight was far from over. But the storm didn't end inside that chamber. By the time the session wrapped, the clash had already spilled into the national bloodstream. News anchors interrupted regular programming with urgent commentary, showing Crockett's takedown on repeat. Pundits sparred live on air, some calling her words a defining moment of modern politics, others dismissing them as grandstanding theater. Yet even critics couldn't deny the sheer impact. On social media, the phrase, "You can suppress votes, but you cannot suppress the truth," became a rallying cry. Hashtags surged, memes flooded timelines, and ordinary citizens echoed her words in videos, protests, and forums. The line transcended political commentary. It became a cultural marker of resistance. Students spray-painted it on posters, activists held it on banners, and commentators dissected its meaning on podcasts that reached millions. Republican leaders scrambled to respond. Some doubled down, claiming Crockett was exaggerating and playing to the cameras. Others tried to pivot, insisting that their bill was misunderstood. But the damage was already done. The image of Crockett holding up their own state data while calling out their fear was replayed so many times that it became seared into the public consciousness. Even Democrats outside of Texas seized the moment. Prominent voices in Washington praised her boldness, calling it proof that truth still had power in an age of cynicism. Progressive groups launched fundraising campaigns overnight, plastering her words across digital ads and promising to fight back against what they described as coordinated voter suppression. Meanwhile, conservative commentators faced a dilemma. Attacking Crockett too harshly risked amplifying her message. Ignoring her made them look weak. Some tried to paint her as reckless, but the clip of her dismantling the Republican talking point with their own numbers undercut every attack. In Texas, the people who had been waiting hours in line to vote saw something more personal. For them, her words weren't just politics, they were validation. Validation that their struggles, their frustrations, their exhaustion under the sun in endless lines had not been forgotten. They flooded comment sections, forums, and radio call-ins to share their stories. And each story only reinforced Crockett's message. This was not a partisan stunt, but a lived reality. By the end of the week, the moment was being compared to the great confrontations of American political history. Some journalists likened it to Barbara Jordan's Watergate speeches, others to fiery exchanges during the Civil Rights Movement. Crockett herself brushed off the comparisons, saying simply, "I told the truth, and the truth spoke for itself." Yet the power of that truth was undeniable. What began as a clash in Texas had become a national reckoning. And while Republicans continued to defend their bill, they were no longer just debating legislation. They were fighting against an idea that had already taken root in the public mind, the belief that suppressing voices could never suppress the reality those voices carried. In that sense, Crockett's words were not the end of a debate, but the beginning of a movement.